Well, good afternoon and good morning, everyone, depending on which side of the earth you're at right now. So we are getting ready to start our second session of this seminar, Saving Our Oceans, the Case for Marine Spatial Planning. So thank you very much for all of those who were already here for the first session. As you can see, we have run a little bit late, but that's totally fine. We're going to have plenty of time for this new roundtable, which is going to evolve around the marine spatial planning and its potential contribution towards blue economy. So we're very lucky today because we're going to have this session moderated by Cheryl, Rita, Carr, who is with us right now. So Cheryl, that you have already met at the beginning of the event, she's a research fellow and head of the Center for Straits of Malacca at the Maritime Institute of Malaysia. She earlier headed the Center for Coastal and Marine Environment at MIMA too, before taking responsibilities in her new portfolio at the Institute. Her research interest is in the areas of ocean governance, natural resources, marine protected area management, and marine pollution. Cheryl is a member of several international and regional groups focusing on environmental initiatives. She also coordinated the earlier draft assessment on the National State of the Oceans and Coasts report for Malaysia, focusing precisely on the blue economy. So without further blah blah again, I'm gonna leave the floor to Cheryl, and please enjoy this second session. Your turn.
Thank you very much, Valerie, for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, speakers and panelists, I'm indeed delighted and also you can say excited because this is a theme that's very close to my heart. MSP and its potential contributions towards blue economy. So we've got the scene set from the earlier keynote presentation as well as session 1, but just to briefly give you an overview to what we're going to try to cover. So ladies and gentlemen, blue economy covers all economic activities as what we've seen in the previous presentations related to the world's oceans and seas, and is predicted to become an important driver for economic growth. For instance, it was quoted earlier that OECD's data and projection shows that value-added output could double in size over the next decade. As the blue economy grows, naturally, the assets of the oceans and seas will face unparalleled pressures. Competition for ocean spaces will increase with the expansion of economic activities, including marine aquaculture, renewable energy, as well as other related industries, such as marine and coastal tourism, and so on. As such, it is of immediate need for us to manage oceans and seas more coherently and to safeguard the marine environment against activities that undermine the basis on which these ocean industries depend on. We feel only a sustainable blue economy that fits within the boundaries of the oceans and seas sustainably is capable of supporting the robust growth of ocean-related economic activities. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, a sustainable blue economy calls for a strategic and integrated approach for development planning, and marine spatial planning as such is gaining traction and momentum to address this. So with that as a background, I'm delighted to introduce to you for this session 2, we've got similar manner with the first session, we've got 2 presenters and 2 panelists that will try to address the theme from the Southeast Asian perspective as well as the European perspective. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the first speaker. Ms. Amy Gonzalez is currently the Executive Director of the Partnerships in Environmental Management for the Seas of East Asia, or PEMSE, based in Manila, a regional coordinating mechanism to foster healthy and resilient coasts and oceans through application of science-based integrated management solutions and strategic partnerships in the region. Ms. Amy has got more than 20 years of analytical and advocacy experience on addressing various environmental issues and policy reforms. Before working with PEMSE, she was also attached at WWF, and she served then as the head of executive assistant to 2 cabinet secretaries of the Philippines Department of Environment and Natural Resources With that brief introduction, Amy, it's a pleasure to have you on this session. I pass the floor to you. Thank you. I think you're muted, Amy.
Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Cheryl, for that kind introduction. I'm pleased to see many familiar faces here from Asia and also from my previous life when I was working in WWF in Europe. And I'm really glad to see Juan Ronco as a co-panelist of this meeting. We used to work together when I was a campaigner on fishery subsidies reform for WWF, and he was with the European Commission Environment Division. Would be good to catch up on what happened last week, Juan Ronco, because I think there were some major breakthroughs after 20 years. But I'm using my 20 minutes now, my 10 minutes now, so I should go straight to the topic. I'm talking about integrated coastal management as a mechanism and marine spatial planning as a tool and its potential contribution towards the blue economy in the East Asian Seas region. And I'll be talking about the experience in the region in adopting the tool for effective implementation from the perspective of PEMC. Hang on a second, I'm just going to put this on a slideshow. Oops. Okay, right. So I will not bore you, but these are actually fascinating facts and figures on how the ocean is valued, ocean and coast is valued in the region as a natural capital and as a business opportunity. The region being considered as a biodiversity hotspot, as well as a marine economic center of marine economic growth. And our study also indicated that it employs over 54 million people from 10 countries alone. But this economic growth has come at the expense of ecosystems' health and therefore face many challenges in managing and governing our shared seas. And I don't go into details because I think this context was also provided in previous presentations. PEMC actually was one of the early adopters of blue economy as an alternative pathway to secure sustainable coast and ocean in the region. 11 country ministers adopted the definition that they understand the blue economy to be a practical ocean-based economic model using green infrastructure and technologies, innovative financing mechanisms, and proactive institutional arrangements for meeting the twin goals of protecting our ocean and coast and enhancing its potential contribution to sustainable development, including improving human well-being and reducing environmental risk and ecological scarcities. I mean, it looks like a triple win situation, really. I mean, I think they put everything there to make sure that we will have sustainable, resilient, and inclusive blue economy. Now, we unpack these principles and countries are transitioning towards adoption of the blue economy pathway. And why did they adopt this? Because the threats from business as usual economic model no longer works and has produced unhealthy oceans with the erosion of ocean economy, potential jobs, food security, resiliency, etc. So there was a felt need for sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improve incomes and livelihoods while preserving ocean health for food, medicines, resiliency, and well-being. Sources of blue economy could also be a source of innovations, clean technologies, and market opportunities. Now, blue economy has also been confused with ocean economy, that for as long as we have economic growth in the coastal and marine sector, everything is okay. There's also a misconception that increasing food production from the ocean will lead to sustainable and healthier human diets. But we know, as Cheryl has explained, that the natural assets of our oceans and seas face unparalleled pressures, and so there's a competition for ocean space that is increasing, and so economic activities has to be reined in and to make sure that we have to manage our oceans and seas more coherently and safeguard against such activities. So what are the tools that we have at our disposal to be able to do so? In the region, we have integrated coastal management. This was An application that has been pioneered in the region by PEMC, although this has been adopted in the US and Europe way back in the 60s. It is an approach to managing a defined coastal area that understands the coast as a complex and dynamic system that encompasses many interactions between people and ecosystems, and it should be managed as a whole. Utilizes coastal use zoning, integrated land and sea use zoning, integrated land and water use zoning as a tool for allocating available coastal, both land and water resources and spaces to various land and water use activities and functions, with a view to developing sustainable development goals. Marine spatial planning came at a later stage. I think it only came around 1998, but it's a fascinating process. It's a public process of analyzing and allocating the spatial and temporal distribution of human activities in marine areas to achieve ecological, economic, social objectives that are usually specified through a political process. This is also referred as marine spatial planning and ocean planning by UNESCO. Now, why am I putting these two together? The reason why I am doing this is because oftentimes countries are bombarded with lots of concepts, and we have to unpack and distill to see what works for when and how. So I would like to look into the attributes of both MSP and ICM, and I've put in red what could be the differences, but there are, as you can see, there are so many similarities. All those in blue are similar, but marine spatial planning concerns the maritime space and cover large areas, including the exclusive economic zone, while the integrated coastal management obviously covers the zone. But it is being upscaled at the moment. It both encompasses space and time. It concerns human activities and consequences, integrated, strategic, and participatory. So some principles and attributes are the same. But MSP refers to the sea as a functional ecosystem, while integrated coastal management refers to both land, sea as a single planning and management unit. Now, another difference is that MSP requires transnational coordination within sea basins. So you can see the connectivity of MPAs that the speaker earlier was talking about, while in the integrated coastal management, we are looking at associated watershed. And MSP requires coordination and connection with spatial planning on land, while integrated coastal management requires coordination, spatial planning on water, and the rest you can read. So, like I said, we pioneered integrated coastal management, scaling up in the East Asian Seas region, and we've had some successes with 40% of the coastline covered by ICM. Now, the number is 40%. We still need to validate that because quality is also different from quantity. So at the moment, we are looking at the effectiveness and impact of ICM coverage in many of these integrated coastal management sites. Now, some examples of MSP practices and variants of it. I don't think I have a comprehensive review, but some of those that we have gathered through the UNESCO application status of marine spatial planning is that in Cambodia, Sihanoukville province has completed it, but actually they call it coastal use zoning plan. And then in China, they have been doing this marine functional zone, and covers 11 provincial marine functional zones, cities, and countries. Well, most well known, of course, is Xiamen. Plan has been implemented, and there has been 3 generations of marine functional zoning. In Indonesia, Bontang City was an experiment. Plan has developed, and thank goodness they have an integrated land and marine spatial planning now into law, because at the previously they had a separate land spatial planning and marine spatial planning, and of course, you know who loses when it comes to some conflicts or some use issues. In the Philippines, there has been some application also in 2 provinces where they call it Integrated Land and Sea Use Zoning Plan. And in Batangas, they've had the beginnings of a marine spatial planning through a water use zonation scheme. So different names for the same or roughly similar attributes. Thailand, in Trat, probably if there's someone from Thailand, they could tell me whether this is still on the pre-planning stage or there is already some implementation going on. This is initiated by the Marine Conservation Resources Department. And they have a Marine and Coastal Resources Promotion Act as well, which encompasses some elements of marine spatial planning. In Vietnam, Territorial Sea covers 8 coastal provinces. There is a plan analysis, and they call it both CRSD project with some components of MSP. Da Nang and Hue, there's also a plan implemented, and they call it Coastal Use Zoning Plan. So what has been the lessons and experiences from previous workshops in terms of trying to integrate integrated coastal zone, coastal management, and marine spatial planning? In 2012, marine spatial planning or its variants, coastal use zoning, marine functional zoning, and integrated land and sea use plan was thought to be a key instrument in ensuring harmonized and sustainable uses of coastal area and conservation of critical systems. In 2015, EASC is the East Asian Seas Congress, which is a triennial event which we organize and gather of experts from different topics on marine and ocean governance. And in that particular session, one of the key, the highlights and the key message was that there is no single tool or methodology that can accommodate the varying objectives of zoning in different sites, and that there is a need to strengthen capacity for evaluation and zoning through training. And then there is the mention of a network of learning centers providing opportunities for application at the local level also in PEMC sites. In a 2019 regional workshop where I think one of the universities here from Malaysia attended, they felt the need for support. Countries were calling for support in terms of legislation, collaboration, monitoring, evaluation, and capacity building. And for example, on legislation, the needs are that countries such as Myanmar and Timor-Leste express that they have very limited experience, but also they need legislation that requires MSP for it to be operationalized. Other countries rely on existing legislation or other existing arrangement, but while Vietnam emphasized that there is no legal mandate for marine spatial planning in their country, thus not requiring the local government to undertake and implement marine spatial planning. In the case of Indonesia, changing regulation where jurisdiction is put under provincial government and no longer within city government's authority, this is the issue of subsidiarity, presents some challenges in effectively implementing marine spatial planning. This is the same case even in Korea, where the jurisdiction has shifted to provincial government as well. So there are some regulatory and territoriality issues also that we need to understand. And then in improving the accountability and capacity of each country, the planning system should be well understood to maximize leverage and opportunities. The importance of collaboration as a key factor which makes a difference in strengthening MSP implementation in the region was also highlighted. They say that marine spatial planning as a process is social rather than purely scientific and technical, and therefore should be considered from the planning stage, and that there has to be strong coordination among institutions involved with marine spatial planning, since it is a process that consists of regulation of human activities. Then decisions should be coordinated among different users of the ocean to allow for more sustainable use of marine resources. Probably sounds commonsensical in places in Europe, but here the realization of the need to collaborate and coordinate has has a process, has been a stepwise approach as well. So as we know that though it takes time, engaging the stakeholders in the stage of planning gives them a sense of ownership and potentially contribute to emerging local champions that can be the key to success of MSP. Now, cross-border collaboration was also emphasized and that needs to be strengthened, and that there are only a few transboundary MSP examples that exist in practice. Whereas management actions usually affect neighboring jurisdictions, it is important to know how to manage these interactions through marine spatial planning. Now, this is not what I'm saying is that it's not a criticism of the tool, but more the feedback that we got in terms of how to strengthen effective implementation of marine spatial planning in the region. Another issue that needs support is the monitoring and evaluation, where they raise the importance of monitoring and evaluation with simple indicators to determine the effectiveness of the process, to know the impacts on its effects on marine areas and habitats. The cumulative effects of the activities should be regularly monitored and evaluated. Monitoring and evaluation can also enable adaptive management and ensure consistency and equity of MSP plans. The importance of data was also raised under this topic, and I think it was raised earlier as well. So using simple, available data and indicators can help ensure progress rather than complex ones. Data should inform how the existing plan should be updated when being revised, and review existing approach in adapting the tool in the region towards effective implementation. Capacity building was a felt need. Human resource development with trainings to build key competencies necessary in MSP, such as facilitation skills, strong coordination, technical skills, and visionary planning. It was also stated that institutional capacity of some countries need to be strengthened to develop national laws and policies so that MSP will have a legal backing. The lack of understanding on how MSP can be implemented on the ground, especially in a national government level, was also raised during the discussion, and that sometimes it results to a mismatch of training opportunities that should target local government's capacity, for example. It was suggested that people from the local government who are directly working in the local context should also benefit from that training and should not remain at the national level. The role of universities to advance the concept of MSP was also raised. Scholarships, funding opportunities for trainings are available in some of the members also. And so networking and engaging and supporting other countries was emphasized. So there are elements for integration between MSP and ICP. The questions that needs to be asked though are that, are there national policies and plans in place for both coastal zone and the ocean? Are ICM strategies in line with MSP policies? Are planning instruments for coast and ocean compatible? Is there coordination between the agencies responsible for both tools? Are there common goals or overarching objectives between the two types of policies? Are there common indicators in what areas and fields? Is there scope for integrated measures? And that the question that is not here also is, are there best practices that we could look at as models as well? The challenges to effective integration is that it requires flexibility, novel approaches, people and institutions resist change, public participation and stakeholders in some areas are still difficult to do, although there is more and more citizen empowerment and engagement. Different languages and terminologies, as I've mentioned earlier. The adoption of a systemic versus a sectoral approach, I think this was raised earlier by previous speakers as well. And then finding the appropriate indicators. So in PEMC, we do have some tools that could help some of these countries adopt marine spatial planning as a tool within the integrated coastal management mechanism. And one of the things that we have been engaged is looking at the value of the coast and ocean through our national state of the ocean and coast report, because we need some of this baseline information so that over time we can actually monitor the impacts on the water and on the people. Cheryl was engaged in the development of the national state of ocean and coast in Malaysia, because we believe that, you know, we can't manage what we can't measure. And then the networks, we have some networks also, the PEMC network of learning centers and the PEMC network of local governments that are working towards the adoption of local blue economies at the community level. We have a roadmap that calls for collaboration. There's a joint roadmap for MSP to 2030 submitted by IOC UNESCO in 2017. We actually also incorporate that in our Sustainable Development Strategy for the Seas of East Asia, our shared regional strategy and a roadmap to 2030 with some priority actions. So I just leave you with these two messages, which is failing to plan is planning to fail. Planning for the sustainable development of the ocean and coast, including the associated watersheds, is occurring at various levels and scales in the EAS region. The size and scope of ICM and MSP initiatives vary, but are guided by the same concept and principles and overall goals and objectives of achieving healthy ocean, people, and economies. Or in bite-sized portion, it could be called also sustainable, resilient, and inclusive blue economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Amy, for the very comprehensive overview on blue economy baseline and also the way forward in this region. That was indeed very informative and also includes some of the work that we've collaborated with PEMC before. Just to summarize briefly, some of the crucial points that Ms. Amy raised, which is very pertinent. Indeed, PEMC was one of the pioneers in this region to bring up blue economy and the way forward to address blue economy assessment and baselines in this region through the Changwon declaration a couple of years ago. Since then, we've seen a lot of progress, especially in using the different tools that are available through ICM or ICZM to certain countries, and also the development of MSP to support further blue economy and so on. We've seen a little bit on the status of MSP in East Asia especially, but some of the major gaps and challenges that Ms. Amy mentioned is definitely very close to most of the countries in this region, and that includes legislation, support, institutional framework, collaboration between all stakeholders, monitoring, evaluation, and of course, training and capacity building as important areas that still very much exist at this point of time. She also highlighted the roadmap to 2030, and that sheds a bit of light on excellent work that has been planned to come in the next couple of years, I'm sure. With that, thank you very much, Ms. Amy. We'll try to come back to you at the end of the session with questions or comments from there. Now, moving on quickly to the next speaker for this session, we are happy to introduce to you Mr. Juan Ronkov, who is currently the Policy Officer at the European Commission, Directorate General Maritime Affairs and Fishery, DG MAR. His main responsibilities are in maritime spatial planning. So we see a lot of terminologies, but it pretty much refers to the same thing. Prior to that, he was with the Directorate General Education and Culture and Research and Technology. Before starting his career as an EU official, he worked in the information technologies industry in Belgium. Very apt, definitely, Mr. Juan. I'll pass the floor to you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl. You can hear me? You can hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you. Now I will try to launch my presentation. Let's see how it goes, because I am using the web interface. Okay, so can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, great. So I will talk about the background to maritime spatial planning or marine spatial planning and blue economies in Europe. I will base my presentation in a talk that I gave a year ago to the Japanese government that was also very concerned about how to develop the blue economy and at the same time ensure the protection of the marine environment. Now, what is a blue economy? The blue economy is, you can look at it from a perspective of sectors or activities taking place in the marine environment. But not only that, not only in the marine environment, you may also have blue economy sectors active in mainland. Anyway, so we have established sectors in blue, light blue. You see shipbuilding, fishing, shipping, tourism, and now emerging sectors that are coming up and becoming very important in the blue economy. In the EU, we have tried to assess what's the size of the blue economy, what is it made of. So every year, the European Commission is publishing a report. This is the 2022 report. In the slides I sent to you, Cheryl, it was still the 2021. So I am cheating a little bit, but this is the latest version of this report. And then you see the sectors that are taken into account. And below this drop of water, you could say, you see things like common skills, shared infrastructure. So I would call it transversal or things that go across all these sectors and that are needed to develop the blue economy. But I talk about this later on. So why do we need an approach to sustainable blue economy in the EU? You see there, seas and oceans are under pressure. And I put there a small picture of this is in a French city where you see the sewers in the streets. It's a city I think is Rouen, which is close to the sea, but it's not on the coast. And it says the seas begin here. Don't drop or don't throw things here. So 100 kilometers away from the sea, you may have already these issues of pressures on the ocean. Yeah, we have global challenges. That's where the blue economy comes into picture very strongly. I noted some here. For instance, ocean acidification because of climate change, lack of fresh water and inland. And we have these imperatives to reduce emissions, carbon emissions, to throw away less things, to reduce, to have more circular economy. The ocean covers 70% of the Earth's surface, but it's only accountable, I would say, for 5% of economic activity. And still, there are pressures and numerous pressures on the marine environment with this very modest level of economic activity if you take the surface of the oceans. So there is potential to develop this blue economy, but we have to be very careful with that. Yeah, this to respond to the challenges I was showing before, some things will happen. Some activities will have to shift perhaps from land to sea. I mean, we have to be realistic. For instance, in terms of food production, aquaculture has a strong potential for that. Energy is becoming a very hot topic in this context. If you take Europe, now we have an energy crisis because of the geopolitical situation, and in Europe, because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. So we have there quite a lot of things perhaps to do to improve or to have a better energy provision in the European Union. We need to, but this applies also for all parts of the world, and more biodiversity. So it's on land we have biodiversity, but also on the sea, at sea, and both go together. For the blue economy, before in the European Union and the European Commission was speaking about blue growth. So the issue was to promote economic growth in the marine, in the maritime environment by focusing on some sectors. And why this? Because we have the 2008 economic crisis, and there was a need for an economic recovery. Growth in jobs were very important. And then the idea was to focus on subsectors. I will give you some, for instance, blue biotechnology or aquaculture or seabed mining. But the focus has now shifted to a more comprehensive approach. And you see there the new context, which is we have this sustainable development goals at a global level, and the EU has translated this global agenda into a more, I would say, focused agenda on Europe. We call it now the European Green Deal. So it's a kind of overall strategy to adapt to the new reality, I would say. I mentioned before energy, but it's also for biodiversity. It's also for food. So there are several components of this I would say overall or encompassing or overarching strategy to implement it, to achieve these SDGs, these sustainable development goals. The COVID crisis also reinforced this need for a new approach, and yeah, this also applies to the blue economy. Here you see the new approach for the sustainable blue economy. So for the blue economy to make it really sustainable. So I mentioned there from blue growth to a sustainable blue economy. And there you see, I would say the main components or the main parts of the puzzle, because it's a puzzle. So it's a complicated endeavor to make the economy sustainable. Yeah, we have there these different parts of the puzzle, which I will now perhaps go more into detail. This is the blueprint that the European Commission presented last year in 2021 on how to achieve this, how to get to this sustainable blue economy in the European Union. Well, why do we need it? I think it's a logical, I would say, conclusion. We need environmental, social, and economic sustainability. And at the intersections, we have the sustainable blue economy. One interesting point in the communication is that there is a proposal to have this, to transform the blue economy value chains. So we looked at value chains, and then we see that we can do things like, for instance, decarbonize, improve biodiversity and coastal resilience, promote responsible food systems, or have more circularity. There you see what concrete actions can be done or can be carried out to achieve these goals. For instance, in decarbonization, transition to zero-emission vessels, or in food systems, implement, we have strategic guidelines in aquaculture, or promote more algae. For this, we need also the right conditions. So to create an environment to promote the blue economy. And there you see what can be done, from which areas we can work to have this blue economy developed. So knowledge, that's one of the enablers, I would say. Research, of course, and innovations. Skills for people working in the marine environment, the blue economy. Investment, of course, is necessary. Security, maritime security. So these are enablers that are also part of this new strategy for the blue economy. I will focus on one, for instance, on data. In the European Union, we have this tool called EMODNet, the European Marine Observation and Data Network. And then you see that we have maps that will show you things, for instance, about coastal erosion, shipping density, marine spatial planning or maritime. You see the Danish plan, marine spatial plan, or marine litter. On finance, we have this sustainable blue economy finance principles. We work for this together with WWF, the ISU, the International Sustainability Unit of the Prince Charles Foundation, and the European Investment Bank. We have the Horizon Europe Research Program, with a mission. So there is a dedicated, I would say, action for healthy ocean seas and coastal and inland waters. So research money will be channeled to projects working in this area. Now, on maritime spatial planning, which is an enabler of this blue economy, key and a critical enabler, I will not be, Jose Perez in his presentation spoke already about this. So why maritime spatial planning? You see the good reasons why to do it. And he spoke also about the EU framework legislation, the EU directive on the maritime spatial planning, and what are the main components of it. So the thing is, member states have to do the plans. So the European countries, the European Union countries, have to prepare the plans. There was a timeline for this. So in 2014, the directive entered into force. 2016, they had to integrate the provisions of this European framework law into their national laws. And then last year, the 31st of March was the deadline for the implementation of for the preparation and establishments of the plans. As Chris said before in his intervention, there have been some delays. COVID was one of the reasons, but not the only one. So some member states are still have to prepare their maritime spatial plans, or finish or complete rather. These are the key requirements that we have in the directive. And now I will focus on blue economy, maritime spatial planning. A concrete example is energy. And then we have offshore wind energy. And offshore wind energy needs space. So to achieve the goals that the European Union has set itself, today there was a vote in the European Parliament on this. So we need to develop the offshore wind capacity to very substantial, in a very substantial manner, to achieve hundreds of gigawatts, in the coming years. So we need to deploy this wind turbines, where you see in red the places where if red or orange or yellow is difficult to deploy, if blue or light blue, it's easy to develop. Is not is excluded. So it's more in these areas which are available. So the dark blue or light blue, that it's suitable to deploy this wind turbines. But so there is not much space available as well. So I take the example of 3 EU countries: Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. How did they plan for this? This is a German maritime special plan for the North Sea, because in Germany they have also the Baltic Sea. And you see these arrows point to the areas where they want to develop offshore wind energy. So it's quite a detailed plan. This is the Netherlands, the Dutch maritime special plan. And then you see also the areas where they want to develop offshore wind energy. And this is the Belgian plan. And then also if you look at the center upper left, these are the areas that have been allocated for offshore wind energy, and which are being in the offshore wind parks are being developed. So fisheries, aquaculture, offshore wind this is a case where conflicts can arise. And so in maritime spatial planning is there to solve conflicts. That is one of the, I think, key features of a maritime spatial plan. So for fisheries and aquaculture, we have in some EU countries, fishing is not allowed in these wind parks because of security issues. But there is still evidence of potential benefits of coexistence. So something could be done to allow for fishing in marine offshore wind parks, because these parks could provide a suitable habitats for commercial species. So there is a case to promote this coexistence, this co-use. These these offshore wind parks can have the effect of reef effect. They can also be developed. So if you add rock armoring to the offshore wind sites, you may have even a more beneficial effect. Another possibility of reducing conflict is co-use in areas where offshore wind energy is being deployed, but to use it together with aquaculture, offshore aquaculture. And in Belgium, they have this pilot project for a culture of mussels inside the wind park. Yeah, this is an opportunity for good examples, I would say, for coexistence, for good marine spatial planning. Also opportunities for fisheries, as fishermen could play a role as guardians of this marine offshore wind parks, of surveyors of it, so keeping an eye on this. They could be paid for it. This is a picture of what this aquaculture mussel project is. So you see there this grid where the mussels are being cultured. And then to conclude, offshore wind energy and fisheries and agriculture. So if there is a successful collocation, I would say, should be supported. This is an example. I am giving a kind of case study. Consultation and early engagement, clear procedures, protocols, permission, insurance for fishermen that access these parks. Pilot studies, of course, science knowledge. We need to know more about this. Construction of artificial reefs, as I was mentioned before, and then, of course, perhaps fishermen will be denied the right to fish there. So something will have to be done in terms of compensation. In the Netherlands, I think they're working on this. So that's all from me. I think that in the European Union, we are. IME very skillfully showed to us some of the challenges and some of the things that can be done. We are trying to in the European Union, member states or countries and the European Commission, to work on these, to meet these challenges. But I acknowledge that in the Southeast Asia context, it will be perhaps much more difficult. So because of many reasons, the size, the complexities, the nature. So I think at some point in time, we could learn from what you are doing or you will do in the Southeast Asia context. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwan Romko, for the very informative and interesting presentation. It was an overview on how EU is addressing MSP into blue economy and how advanced you are already when you speak about MSP and, for instance, the new approaches, the joint efforts across the different sectors, setting the right conditions, as well as interesting ways that you have shown us to address possible co-location when it comes to conflicting users in a particular area. So with that, thank you once again, Mr. Kwan. We'll keep the questions perhaps to the end. I'll quickly move on to the first panelist for this session. I am happy to introduce you to Chris, Mr. Chris. He is a marine biologist and a coastal manager with a bachelor's degree from University of Southampton. in marine biology and oceanography, and a master's degree in tropical coastal management from the University of Newcastle in the UK. And as an associate director at Atkins Limited, Chris heads up the coastal and marine environment team. And since 2010, Chris has led many of their international projects related to integrated maritime policy, blue economy, and marine spatial planning. Since 2019, Chris has been team leader for the European Commission's Msp assistance mechanism and its connected European Msp platform. With that introduction, Chris, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for that kind introduction, and obviously to everyone for this welcome opportunity to present. I realise by intervening earlier, I slightly sort of removed my grand entrance, but thank you very much to the speakers so far, Juan, Amy. Actually, Juan, I think you probably said many of the things I would have added. But just as an introduction to the assistance mechanism, as Juan said, in 2014, the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive in the EU was launched. Following that, the creation of the Msp assistance mechanism was also established, which is to support the European member states in the implementation of that Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, but also to support the European Commission on all aspects related to MSP. I was lucky enough to take over as project leader in 2019, so some way through its existence. But the feedback, I suppose, from the European from the EU member states is that this mechanism where they can call upon for support with regards to MSP itself is actually vital, and we act as a conduit in sharing information between member states and across the European MSP community. As part of this, we also run the European Msp Platform, which some of you may have come across. It's a sort of information repository and communication device, if you like, that allows MSP practitioners and other interested parties to understand the status of MSP within the EU and access best practice and studies and papers regarding MSP, and we do our best to make everyone aware of conferences and events which are coming up which might be useful. I think of particular, obviously, Cheryl, when you and I briefly spoke about this, obviously the idea is to see what we can, maybe what I can share from the European context into a different geographical region. I'm very happy to say last week, actually, so very recent, the assistance mechanism and the European Commission hosted the European MSP Stakeholder Conference, where we brought together over 400 representatives of the EU MSP community to discuss the success that's been realized since 2014, but also the challenges that still exist. And I think just to share some of the takeaways is that everyone acknowledges that a huge amount of progress has been made. We've got the establishment of maritime spatial plans for nearly all of the EU member states. But at the which in itself, coming from a position where some of these countries were starting from scratch, is enormous. But at the same time, it's also recognised that there's a huge amount of work still to be done in addressing these future challenges. And Juan has already touched on obviously the energy crisis that's currently being experienced in Europe, but also climate change, the need for adaptive management. We're also undertaking a study on aquaculture for the Commission in the context of maritime spatial planning. And this, if anything, really highlights the need for adaptive planning, because actually you can't simply draw a polygon on a map and say this is set aside for aquaculture, or this is set aside for tourism for the next 15 years. Things change, and these spaces need to move and they need to be able to evolve. So I think coming back to this idea of MSP and the blue economy, From my experience on the integrated maritime policy work as well, I see that MSP is a fundamental tool for blue economy. It is the spatial allocation of space in order to sort of recognize that the highest blue economic return for that area of sea space. And I think it's important to say the blue economic return, because on projects I've worked with, and we've talked about the returns, people just see it as how much money can you make from a certain area of space. But what we're talking about here is your blue economic returns. That area of sea space has the potential to help you meet your objectives. So whether it's conservation, whether it's energy generation, whether it's setting aside areas for sustainable tourism or underwater archaeology, whatever it might be, that area of sea space can help you realize those objectives. So I think coming back to if you start from the outset with a clear objective of where you are going for your MSP and the objectives that you're trying to meet under that, then obviously the MSP is the tool that allows you to spatially allocate the required sea space. But one of the other takeaways from this conference, and it was nicely said earlier in one of the talks, very optimistic, is that collaboration and working together is obviously maybe more established in the EU. I mean, we think so, but actually one of the takeaways from the conference is that it needs to happen more. There is never enough cooperation, data sharing, collaboration, and communication at all levels. I mean, when you're allocating coastal space, one of the slides earlier was talking about MSP, and it covers things large marine space. But the reality is, when we talk about economic sectors, we're talking about really the coastal space. Everyone wants to be, the activities are normally limited in the area closest to shore, which means this becomes extremely busy. And however well you communicate and you engage across different stakeholder groups, some groups will be slightly disappointed at the result that perhaps an area of sea space is used for tourism and MPAs and perhaps not available for fisheries. So it's vital that this process is also transparent and people can understand how you've come to the conclusion that you have, and they understand why you've come to that conclusion, even if it's not necessarily the result they want. So I think including everyone in stakeholder consultation, making sure you're speaking to local, national, transboundary groups so you understand the implications, and making sure it's a fair and transparent process is one of the biggest takeaways that we had from last week. And as I said, whilst a huge amount of success has been recognised in the EU in this field, we also recognise that we've got a long way to go as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think that has been a fantastic sum of points that's going to be definitely relevant to the situation in this region. I remember when we discussed, we were trying to look at where does the EU stand with regards to benchmarking ourselves with moving towards adopting and implementing MSP towards driving blue economy, sustainable development, and so on. And you've put it very nicely where you mentioned this is not a one-size-fits-all, if I may use my term to say it. It's a fluid condition. And we've seen from the progress, successes, and challenges, even for EU, who has definitely started way before we have. And that's definitely going to be some of the way forward that we should be looking at when we try to benchmark ourselves with the European region. You also mentioned some of the crucial challenges that we should be looking at, for instance, climate change, and how do we move towards adaptation, mitigation, and stuff like that. And some of the key points I think that we should definitely include in the way forward when we look into summarizing this is going to be the need for cooperation, collaboration, data sharing, effective communication, and of course, fair and transparent process. So thank you very much, Chris, for that. Excellent points. I will quickly move on to the next panelist and our last panelist for this session, Professor Wan Izzatul Asma is currently the head of the Center for Ocean Governance at the Institute of Oceanography and Environment, or INOS, at University Malaysia Terengganu. She is also a visiting fellow at the Royal Malaysian Navy Sea Power Center. She has been appointed to the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law since 2014, also subspecializing in Ocean, Coastal and Coral Reef Specialist Group, as well as Water and Wetlands Specialist Group, and is a member to the Environmental Law Network International. She currently represents Malaysia upon nomination by the Ministry of Environment and Water to COPSI expert meetings under UNEP. So very relevant, and I'm also aware that there's an ongoing active project on MSP that Professor Wan is coordinating, and perhaps she'll be sharing a bit more on that. I pass the floor to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. So sorry because I'm feeling a bit under the weather today. But we had this morning we had a stakeholders focus group discussion talking about this issue as well, but more on the marine ecological assessment. And we have identified that Malaysia is bountiful in terms of marine biodiversity, but we are also bountiful in the terms of the users of our marine environment. So if I may say something that's not been covered by the other speakers and panelists, is that the Malaysia, not just Malaysia, I think our marine areas, our coastal areas is practically is an Anthropocene ocean now, what we can call it as Anthropocene ocean, which is we can define as a profound alteration to the ocean ecosystem upon which so many people depend on. We have on our coastal area, we have sand mining, we have reclamation for the purpose of development, we have oil and gas activities, we have commercial as well as artisanal fishing. Of course, we have ports and freights activities, and then we also have submarine cables to transport the oil and gas products to the mainland. And so this Anthropocene ocean is actually the one that we are facing now. It's not that we are bountiful. It's not just that we are bountiful with the marine resources, but we also have to be aware that we are being threatened. The marine environment is being threatened because the ocean is not as the one that is given to us by God, but it is something that we are facing now. And then this is very true when it comes to the notion of blue economy. When we talk about ocean economy, so these are the things that the ocean is providing us, but the blue economy is something that we would go for some sustainable use of the ocean for economic growth. And coming back to Malaysia, as Cheryl was mentioning just now, we know that in Malaysia, we are not really so much into the implementation of MSP, except the one in Semporna, Sabah. And then, but we have started off with the help from WWF Malaysia, as well as NOAA, and of course, the Terengganu state government on building capacity on the marine spatial planning system. MSP is quite unknown then in the peninsula, and we started off with building awareness and capacity through several workshops until 2019. And finally, in 2020, a pilot area has been selected to implement MSP, which is in the district of Kuala Terengganu and Kuala Nerus, with the partnership with Kuala Terengganu City Council and the Fujian Institute for Sustainable Ocean of Xiamen University, China. And then this is part of what PEMC was doing. We are learning something from Xiamen City on how they rehabilitated the Xiamen City through marine functional zoning. And then, of course, we know that MSP is fluid, and because of it is spatial, and not just spatial, but it is also temporal. And then we have to put into consideration that MSP is ecosystem-based, area-based. So this is the reason why we chose to do we chose a pilot area first, and then which is Kuala Terengganu and Kuala Nerus. And then, of course, we know that we have been mentioning about integrated management, and it is also have to be adaptive because it is always changing, and then it has to be strategic, and of course it has to be participatory. And MSP is a bit we can call it I think we have a lot to learn from the EU because we have been doing it for quite some time. But in Malaysia, we are just beginning, but we have engaged the the local authority of Kuala Terengganu City Council to work with us. And then we are also inviting the local community to be with us in decision making as well as in capacity building to make changes to the city of Kuala Terengganu and Kuala Nerus. So I think that's all I have for the time being. Cheryl?
Thank you so much, Professor Wan, and thank you for being with us despite to not feeling very well. I wish you speedy recovery, and thank you for the points that you've raised. Indeed, as you've mentioned, we have begun with the pilot case in Semporna, Sabah, in Malaysia, and now the exciting work on the ground is definitely in the east coast of Peninsular Malaysia, focusing on Terengganu, which is coordinated by University Malaysia Terengganu, of course, and Professor Wan's team. And as we move towards more active planning on the ground and so on, capacity building has definitely been one of the priority areas for Malaysia for the stakeholders to better understand what the process really entails, what should we be doing on the ground, and how do we move towards effective MSP, not just a paper concept in that sense. Yeah. So you also raised another interesting point in addition to what Ms. Amy mentioned earlier, ecosystem-based management. So there was a mention earlier on ICM and MSP towards blue economy, and you've also mentioned the Terengganu case is very much ecosystem-based approach to undertake the MSP plans in place and so on. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the two speakers and two panelists for this session. And I see that most of your questions are already replied to in the Q&A function. So I'm just going to quickly see if there's anything else there. Yeah, I see that most of your questions are already answered. The request for slides and recordings and so on, we'll make the announcements later and share further information with all the participants. So maybe 1 minute to see if anything comes up. We are quite okay. We got back on time. It's about 5 minutes over the original time that we set for this, despite to starting a bit late just now. I think we are good. We're all good. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes session 2 on MSP and its potential contributions towards blue economy. You've seen all the different efforts on the ground. You've seen the mechanisms that has been adopted in this region, especially through the PEMSIS initiatives, and also in the European region, the case studies that have been presented to you and so on, and also some of the major gaps, challenges, success stories, and way forward to address blue economy through the adoption and implementation of MSP. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, ex-team speakers and panelists. With that, I pass the floor back to you, Valerie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, and thank you very much all the speakers and panelists of this great second session. I know everyone is a bit tired. It's the end of the day here on our end. I would also like to thank our audience for taking part in this event with us. All the presentations today have been really fascinating, and I am confident that new contacts and collaboration will stem from here. But for now, I would like to invite Gilles Barrier, who is the Deputy Head of Mission at the Embassy of France to Malaysia, so that he can share with us some general concluding remarks for this great day in preparation for tomorrow's session. Gilles, if you're with us, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valerie. Can you hear me? Okay. I would like first to thank all the participants for their attention. I think we have a good number of participants today following our discussion, and it was really thrilling. I would like also to thank all the panelists, the presentations for their contributions. I think we had a very good overview of what is at stake with the MSPs. What I will remember from all the interventions today, which were very rich, was that first we had, especially in the introductory remarks, a good idea of the challenges that awaits us. There are many, many challenges because, as we understand, the oceans are part of our life, and we need the oceans for our own survival. First, because of the issues of global warming, issues of biodiversity, and and of the quality of environment, the quality of food, of fish, if we eat fish. So it's our health, it's our breath. All this is inside the ocean. So the stakes are very, very high. And links to that, we have all the activities, and we have many definitions of the blue economy, many examples of what it encompasses. And it's very rich. There are many things that we're involved in as a human agent on this planet. And between all this, we can see that all the issues of preservation of environments, of the capacity of leading economic activities, of having jobs, of having resources, energy, all this is interlinked and interdependent. And many issues arise, issues of preservation, of quality of life, and I think the MSP, the Marine Spatial Planning, we have many definitions of it as well, is trying to put this in order, which is very difficult. Very difficult because, I mean, I've taken some good ideas. First, the one is that marine spatial planning is an allocation of space for activity. Yes, it is true, but it is not only that. It has also been said that marine spatial planning is essentially social, because at the ground of it, it's a human activity. So, and at the same time, it has been said that marine social planning, MSP, has to be based on science. Okay, so we have many different ideas, and which has led to the idea that planning is very important. If we don't plan our activity, we will be overwhelmed by the problems that are already existing. We have seen that there were many examples in Europe, in Asia. Each country has its different, its own characteristics, its own features, and there are different levels of planning, different in EU, different in Asia, but that we could learn. We could learn from existing experiences, and this is very encouraging because first, what I heard was that there was eagerness from the participants from the EU to share their experiences. There was also eagerness from the participants in Asia also to learn and share. And I think it's also something that is being built. I have noted also these very interesting ideas that there is a need for adaptative planning because there is no definite solution. We might need to evolve in the planning. And also this idea of planning, in the end, what I understand is that it's in essence, it's a political activity because it is about discussing, about understanding how to work together. So it is about to organize human activity. This is why it needs a lot of capacity building. it needs a lot of communication. It needs transparency. That it has also been said that transparency is key for that process. Tomorrow there will be a natural link, because tomorrow the two discussions will focus on the implementation of MSP at local scale. So it will be very interesting to hear how exactly to engage with the local communities, and how to find what are the difficulties to make sure that all the stakeholders can be listened to, can be properly they have their own views properly addressed, and in the end it's about regulation, or it's about governing this activity, which is on land, which is on sea, which is on land and sea. We had also many very good analysis of the different existing tools. And what we learned from it is that there is no one-size-fits-all, which has also been said, no one-size-fits-all. I think every community, every country has to find the right answers. But this being said, we also understand that there might be some needs to make sure that there is no holes, that there might be some overlaps, and sometimes there might be some lack of governance. And this is probably the most difficult issue, which is how to address the coordination of different existing maps of planning, which eventually require coordination on the transboundary level. So a lot of issues to discuss, a lot of possibilities, a lot of tools already existing, and a lot to do on our plates. I think tomorrow's discussion will be very interesting to follow. And once again, I would like to thank everybody for the very fruitful discussion, and looking forward to follow discussion tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gilles, for these concluding remarks. So once again, thanks everyone here. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks all of the colleagues for the organization, all the speakers, participants. And so we will be waiting for you tomorrow, same channel, same time, and we will have another 2 exciting roundtables. So thank you very much, and have a very nice evening or afternoon. See you tomorrow.
See you. Bye-bye.